everyone. Welcome to Math Lesson 2.1. We're going to be working on finding volume in cubic centimeters. So basically what we're going to be doing today is taking measurement and finding volume and putting them together. Two concepts that we've already talked about, but now we're combining them into one. All right, so to start out, let's talk about some of the units of length that you guys are already familiar with. So in past grades, when you've been asked to measure things and you're just measuring the length of something, what are some of the units that you've used? Odds are you are probably familiar with something like inches. That's pretty common. That's usually what we start out with in second grade when you start learning measurement, and then you go on there into third grade when you're talking about feet. And then if you're using really long measurements, you might be using something like miles. Or if you're doing a different type of measurement, you might be using, if you're doing long ones, you might use kilometers. And then also using metric units, you could do meters. You could use centimeters. Those are much smaller. And the tiny, tiny, tiny one, millimeters. And then I think I'm still forgetting one. Oh, in the US measurement, we go from inches to feet to yards. I forgot about yards. So they're not grouped together, but that's okay. These are all units of length that you should be familiar with. You might not have measured things in miles or kilometers because it's pretty hard to do that because they are so long. But if you're driving along the road in the US, you would see signs that say how many miles per hour you're allowed to drive. In a lot of other countries, you might see how many kilometers per hour you're allowed to drive because they are so long. But you're probably familiar with those terms at least. Okay, so when we are measuring using these terms and we're using our units of length, we are measuring something that is linear. Okay, that means it is a line. It's one straight line. So linear means just one line, right? Now, when you were in third and fourth grade and you started talking about measuring area, you probably started to get familiar with terms like this. For inches, you didn't say that the area was inches. You would say it was square inches. For feet, you would measure in square feet, which you could also write as, let me see if I can fit it in here, feet squared. Okay, you could write it like that. Same with square inches. You could write IN squared. You could do square miles. Should have left myself a little more space here. Square, I'm going to abbreviate kilometers. Like that. Square meters. Square centimeters. Square millimeters. And square yards. Don't know if I can fit that. Yards squared. Oh, sorry about that. Try to fit it in the best I can. All right, so if you guys will notice, in all of these measurement types, when we're looking at units of area, every single one is in square and then the type of measurement that we're using, right? So square inches or square feet or square miles, whatever it is, if we're talking about area, we are talking about a square. Now, why is that? Well, in third and fourth grade, when you were talking about area, you were usually talking about all of the space that is inside a square, right? You're not just measuring one line anymore, you're measuring everything that's inside here. So that's why you're measuring the square that is here. But this square is still two-dimensional. It is not coming off of the paper. It is flat. It's 2D. It's not 3D. So you're just measuring the square. Okay, now that we're in 5th grade and we are talking about volume, we're moving on to the next method, okay? We're not talking about just linear measurement or square measurement. Now we are talking about cubic measurement. Okay, so the way we're gonna write that, when we're talking about inches, if we're measuring volume, we would be measuring cubic inches, which you could write as inches cubed instead of inches squared. Okay, let me fit this in here so you can see the comparison. So when we're looking at area, we would be writing it as inches squared. When we're looking at volume, we're looking at inches cubed. Okay, so it would continue with all of these, and this, sorry, this is an abbreviation. That means inches. I just couldn't fit the whole thing in there. If I'm looking at feet, it would be cubic feet, which would be, goodness gracious, feet cubed. Okay, just like that. I'll go ahead and fill out the rest of these. Cubic miles. Cubic kilometers. Cubic meters. Cubic centimeters. Cubic millimeters. And cubic yards. There we go. All right, so you'll notice as we're progressing from linear to square to 3D, okay, we start with just inches, then we go to square inches, and then we go to cubic inches. Now, why is that? When we're measuring volume, friends, we're adding another dimension to our measurement. So before we were just measuring, well, the first time, just one line. That's why that's all it is. It's just this flat line. When we go to measuring area, now we're measuring the area of a space, but it's still a flat space. When we go to cubic, or when we go to volume, sorry, we are now measuring more than just a flat space. We're measuring a 3D object. So it's not flat anymore. It has another dimension. Instead of just being a square, it also has another dimension on it that we now have to take into consideration. Okay, so this right here would be just the flat square, but now we have to worry about this dimension also. And so we're looking at a cube instead of a flat square like we were when we were measuring area. All right, so as we measure volume, you got to remember whatever unit of length that you are using to measure, whatever unit it is, when you are measuring the area of it, it's going to be square, right? Because you are measuring a square, or the area of a square. If you are measuring the volume, you're talking about a cube. You are talking about 3 different dimensions here, and that means you have to have the 3 here if you're going to do the abbreviation, or cubic in front of it, because you're talking about a cube. Okay, so let's keep that in mind and let's apply that. All right, I'll leave this here and now we'll try it out together. Okay, so I have this box, kind of similar to what we have been using to fill up with our cubes and measure how much volume it can hold, right? The only thing, and you might have already noticed this, there are no lines on the outside of this box. Well, except for the edges where I had to cut and fold. However, normally in the other boxes we were using, in fact, I have one right here, it gave us the dimensions of where each of the cubes should go, right? Of how big each cube is. So I could just count this up and see the area of this whole side. I can count up this side okay? And we've talked about how we could figure that out. This one is different. It's blank. There is nothing here to guide me on how much should fit here, okay? So if I'm told to measure this, the volume of this box in centimeters, how am I going to do that? If there's no markings on it, I'm going to have to use some other tool, right? I could use centimeter cubes, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use a ruler, okay? Or technically in my case, it's a measuring tape because I do not have a centimeter ruler with me right now. So, whoops, sorry, wrong side. Here is my measuring tape. This is the inches side. I am using the centimeter side, which is these little markings down here. It has a tiny little cm. I don't know if you can read that. Tiny little cm right there, which tells me that it is centimeters. There, sort of, you can see it. So I'm going to be using these small little markings down here because that is centimeters. And I was just told to measure this in centimeters. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with my long side here. All right, just notice here and here, they're the same. So I could measure the top part or the bottom part. I'll just do the bottom one because I can lay the measuring tape right on top of it. So since I'm using a measuring tape, I have to hold it nice and tight so that it doesn't go all floppy on me because that's not going to be a good measurement. If you're using a ruler, then you don't have to worry about that because those are nice and stiff. But my measuring tape is kind of floppy, so I have to hold it nice and tight so it's like a ruler. So I'm going to put it at the very edge here. I'm going to hold it tight, and I'm going to see where my box ends down at the other end. Okay, so if here, whoops, sorry. If here is where 0 is, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It looks like it's ending right at 8 there. So let me write that down. My length is 8. All right, now I need to find some other measurements. Well, actually, first of all, before we move on, so that 8 is telling me that if I had 8 centimeter cubes, I could fit 8 of them right along this line, right? If I had centimeter cubes, I could fit 8 this way. Okay, so going this direction, doesn't matter how many times I stack them because I haven't measured that yet, but just going from here to here, the length, I could fit 8 of them, right? Now, I don't have those cubes, I'm using a ruler instead, but it represents how big a centimeter cube would be. So I could fit 8 of those centimeter cubes. Okay, let's try the width. So I'm going to turn it this way, looking at this direction here. And I'm going to do the same thing, measure from the bottom, hold it nice and tight. All right, looks like it is ending at 5. I see the lines going right here over where this 5 is. Okay, so my width is going to be 5. All right, now if I was just wanting to do the area, that's all I would need, just the length and the width. But all that would give me is the area of this flat bottom here, which we can refer to as the base, right? We've talked about that in a few of our lessons. So if I just want to find the area of the base, I'm done. However, that's not what I was asked to do. I was asked to find the volume of this box or prism. And to do that, I need another measurement because volume has a third dimension, okay? Don't forget, we can't forget about this last dimension when we're talking about volume. So I've done the length, I've done the width. The last one I need to do, right here, I need to do the height. Okay, I can't forget about the height. So I'm going to put it up like this. I'm looking at the height that's going up and down. I'm going to hold my measuring tape. Okay, looks like 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks like it's ending right about 4. You can ignore my bad tape job, but it's close enough to 4. All right, so it looks like our height is 4. All right, so let's take those measurements and let's plug them into the formula that we've been talking about. So remember, there are 2 different formulas. They both equal the same thing. One is volume equals base times height, or if you want to break it apart a little bit more, volume equals I'm going to do the cursive L like Mr. Bento. Length times width times height. Okay, these are the same formula. It's just in this one, the base has already been found. They already found the base by multiplying the length times width. Okay, so you can just multiply all three because in multiplication, it doesn't matter what order you multiply in, you're gonna get the same answer every time. So you could do it like this, or you could just space them all out and just multiply them all together. Doesn't matter, you will get the same answer. All right, so let's plug in our measurements here. So our volume should be length, which was 8, times width was 5, times height was 4. All right, so let's see if I can just do this in one motion. Let's see, 8 times 5, I know that is 40. Okay, so 40 times 4. All right, well, I know 4 times 4, that's 16. And then all I need to do is just add that 0 on there because this moved one place value because this is a 40, not a 4. All right, so it should be 160. There is my volume. Now, here's the thing. I'm not done because I just have a number here. What we're talking about today is making sure that we have our units correct when we were finding the volume. So remember, I was measuring in centimeters. In fact, I should have labeled that over here. I'm sorry, I didn't. Each one of these was 8 centimeters, 5 centimeters, and 4 centimeters. So that means when I multiply all three of those together, I got 160, but it's not just 160, it's 160 cubic centimeters, or you could write it cm cubed. Okay, so cubic centimeters or centimeters cubed. Either one is correct, but you have to tell me the units that you are using, okay? Otherwise, if I didn't see this box in front of me, I'd have no idea what units you're talking about. Maybe you were measuring in meters. That would be a huge box, but I wouldn't know unless you tell me what units you are using. And since this is volume, it is cubic units, not square, and not just the units by themselves, cubic units, okay? So since this was centimeters, it is cubic centimeters. All right. That's all of our lesson for today, friends. Good luck on your homework and make sure to ask your teacher if you have any questions, and have a great rest of your day.